Listen, we'll get on to that in a sec, but it's being reported that Labor federal MP Mike Kelly will quit his ultra-marginal New South Wales seat of Eden Monaro due to health issues, creating the first post-pandemic federal by-election. This was big news on Sunday. We were here on Outsiders when Andrew Clennell was breaking that news very excitedly. Tell us what it means exactly.
Well, look, first of all, Mike Kelly has been subject to a lot of speculation over the last 12 to 18 months that he would surrender his seat. He has been very ill. He's had a very serious illness, and it was almost surprising to see him return to Parliament. And he indicated when he did come back to Parliament privately that he was still going to be facing further treatment. So everyone has had an eye on what might happen here. And of course, this would be not just the first by-election since the pandemic, but the first by-election since Scott Morrison's miracle election win. And it would also be Anthony Albanese's first electoral test as leader.
Yes.
So it's got a lot riding on it. And at the moment, you would have to say that the Liberals should and would stand a candidate and would probably stand a reasonable chance of winning the seat. Mike Kelly held it narrowly last time. And it's one of those seats they call a bellwether seat, which normally goes with a change of government. Mike Kelly held it on his own accord and held it against that trend. But a by-election now or in the near future is going to be a big test for Scott Morrison, but an even bigger test for Anthony Albanese.
And so in the light of all that, Dennis, obviously these Newspoll figures are even more important than normal. So can you talk us through the Newspoll figures? And you always have the best analysis of them, so take it away.
Well, look, I think obviously Scott Morrison personally has rocketed away. He has now at an historically high level. Only Kevin Rudd had a higher satisfaction rate, and that was about 71, 72. So he's very close to a record high satisfaction rating for a Prime Minister. Interestingly, when Kevin Rudd had that, it was the top of his honeymoon. Labor had been elected, and the party vote was very strong. What we see now is that Scott Morrison, who was personally damaged during the December bushfires, he lost a lot of satisfaction with voters. Anthony Albanese was in front of him as preferred Prime Minister, and it looked bad for Scott Morrison. What he has demonstrated is that unlike Malcolm Turnbull and to an extent Kevin Rudd, he learns from his mistakes, and he was not going to repeat any of the errors that he made during the bushfire season. And we can see just on the way he's approached the management of the coronavirus, the creation of the National Cabinet. This was Scott Morrison's idea. So he is at the peak of a National Cabinet which involves a majority of Labor leaders. And so what he is being seen to be is completely bipartisan, completely focused on the coronavirus, and it is rewarding him personally. But I think the big message here on the party votes is not so much that the coalition on a two-party preferred. I'm never a great advocate of the two-party preferred vote. And I think that what is interesting here is that after the coalition, even when Scott Morrison was suffering a personal loss with voter satisfaction, the party was still where it was on primary vote when it won the election. And they are there still. So the coalition is still at the primary vote level it was when it won the election. Now, that's not a bad place to plateau if you're going to plateau. Yes. or to flatline. There's no doubt. And by the way, Labor is only marginally better off where it was when it lost the election. So I think the message out of this Newspoll, the message out of the coronavirus, is that Scott Morrison has performed very well personally. It's allowed him to appear to be bipartisan, and he has been bipartisan with the state premiers. and it has been a very presidential presentation with only Greg Hunt and Josh Frydenberg being in regular contact. Anthony Albanese has found it difficult to be relevant at this time, particularly when there's no parliamentary sitting. But I think the bottom line from, yes, Scott Morrison has had a big boost. He's far in advance of Anthony Albanese now as preferred Prime Minister, and the coalition has a primary vote which is at the same level when it won the election. I think the message here for the Labor Party from the Australian public is that they are now liking Scott Morrison. They're not particularly enamoured of Anthony Albanese. And the real reason that they're not shifting from to Labor is because of Labor's policies. Yeah. Labor's policies were rejected at the last election, and these primary vote figures show there's been no shift, and this has been the case now for several months. Absolutely. The party vote hasn't shifted.
Dennis, I mentioned earlier John Howard. John Howard and Resources Minister Keith Pitt have called for a focus on expanding and processing our natural resources, so this is after the virus, like coal, to strengthen our economy after the pandemic and all this is over. What do you make of that? You interviewed him. How was it?
Well, yes, as always, John Howard has a very pragmatic, cautious, but realistic view and always sees the politics of the situation. Now, what he has said is that we should keep all of the best things that have come out from the Australian model on how we have approached the coronavirus crisis. Egalitarian spirit, also the Liberal government actually providing a flat rate job keeper program. And what they have done as well is tried to get business continuing, and the resources sector has continued. Yes, there have been areas affected by poor markets and prices and oil and so on. However, iron ore, coal, the backbone of the Australian economy, has continued to export and, as John Howard said, may actually come out of this crisis with an enhanced outlook because the fall in production around the world of our resources. And Keith Pitt has made the point that we really need to focus on this. And as John Howard said, look, if there is a government out there which is trying to deliberately reduce our production of our great God-given assets.
Exactly, Dennis.
They're out of their head. They're just mad. And so this is one of the real lessons of the coronavirus. It goes to the relationship with China. It goes to our relationship and our trading relationship around the world, that we should not cut our own throat with our most basic and fundamental strengths of our economy, which have been for decades, including cheap energy from coal.
Hear, hear, Dennis Shanahan. So great to chat to you. Couldn't have put it better myself. That was a fantastic wrap-up. Thanks so much, mate, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Rowan.